Mother Nature, Mother Nature, she's gonna get you. Yeah, she's gonna get you. Mother Nature, she's grown to hate you, and she's gonna get you. Gonna get you, you betcha.
Every year of my life, that's almost 52 years so far, the world has
To
become
Nature
worse and
Bats
worse.
Last on the Progressive Radio Network. It's NBL on PRN.FM. This November the 5th, 2019 edition, episode 132 of Nature Bats Last, comes to you pre-recorded from Rakino Island in Aotearoa, New Zealand, from Winchester County, New York in the United States, and from the province of Alberta in Canada. It's a three-country show pre-recorded to fit the schedule of our guest. This is Kevin Hester, and I'm again joined by my co-host Guy McPherson. Today's show includes a conversation with parent and psychologist Peter Miller. Peter has become known for his quick acceptance of the evidence regarding abrupt climate change and where it leads. More recently, Peter has conducted recorded conversations with people coming to grips with this evidence. It's been quite a path. And Guy, can you describe a bit of the history, please?
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. As you indicated, Peter is a psychologist who began with skepticism and then quickly worked through the evidence. He first contacted me about a year ago, October 18th of 2018 to be precise, with a lot of questions. Such skepticism is expected, of course, from intelligent people. Aided by intellectual curiosity, abundant scholarship, and a 10-call series of online conversations with me subsequently posted to YouTube, one of those including you also, Kevin, Peter moved from a skeptic to somebody who fully embraces near-term human extinction. Indeed, as an indication of his acceptance and continuation of his life of service, Peter has begun recording online conversations with other people interested in pursuing a path similar to his own. Peter Miller, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, of course. Because we pre-recorded this episode, we will not be taking your toll-free calls today. So, Kevin, do you have a question to start us off with, or do you want me to dive in?
No, you go first, please.
All right. Peter, you've been hosting recorded conversations, as I indicated, and posting them on your YouTube channel for several months. How's that going?
Well, I did it for a while to have an experience with it and sort of experiment with the process that I came up with for just working with people to explore their thoughts and emotions on the subject. I've taken a bit of a break from it here now for about a month and a half due to some life stress that I was dealing with and some extraordinary kind of relationship challenges. But while I was doing it, it was actually very interesting, and it was enjoyable meeting with people where they're at in their experiences with all this, is which ultimately I think I saw myself probably doing even in the beginning when I started meeting with you. I wanted to know what was happening with people. One of my initial curiosities was Michael C. Rupert. As you probably recall, and how maybe he experienced this whole topic, and I'm sure he had lots of things going on, but what does this topic, how do people experience it? Where does it lead them in terms of their thinking, feeling, behavior, all that kind of stuff? But all in all, it's been a really interesting journey, and I think I have learned a lot about myself in the process as well, my own psychology. I'm probably going to be resuming the conversations because they were really quite meaningful, and I have had a few inquiries along the way here while I haven't been doing it. So that's kind of a brief summary, I guess, about it all.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I'm not surprised you're taking a break because, as Kevin is aware, as I'm aware, it's a grueling process. And having these conversations can be tough on relationships, especially the relationships that are most intimate to us. How many conversations have you posted online so far? Do you know?
I think there's about 10 or 11.
Okay.
10, yeah, that happened. And yeah, that's the
And
extent of it for now.
how has the response been to those from other people and from the people you're conversing with?
It's mostly been positive. I think people have enjoyed witnessing what other people are thinking and feeling on the subject, and kind of getting to know them, intimately from a distance. I've had a few haters, which I think is a bit strange. There was one person in particular that would just really rip into me in the comments in every hospice interview, and I was kind of always scratching my head, going like, why would you, you know? I think it had something to do with me talking to people as though this subject is a real subject, and it's happening, and the debate is kind of over. I think that really bothers some people.
Well, I can imagine so. There's a lot of fear out there as well. There's a lot of privilege to be lost as society collapses and as Habitat for Humans goes away. So some people are not really looking forward to our demise. And I have to say that I'm one of them, but that doesn't make me particularly angry when I talk about it.
No, yeah, like I guess that talking as if it's real is maybe like the debate. The debate is concluded. The science is solid. That really grinds on some people, and I guess they don't like that. They don't like that kind of conclusion at this point. Although it seems really obvious to me, but and many others, but that's where
Right.
many people are at, especially where I live in the world. I live in a sort of a very conservative climate, like politically. So I'm in a really.
Yes,
I'm
I
in
would say
I'm,
that's an understatement. They're in the
Yeah.
middle of Tarzan's country.
Yes. So I'm a duck out of water here. Yeah.
Hey, Pete,
Yep.
one of the things I would like to discuss is I thought that the interview you had with Felice Todd was absolutely spectacular.
Oh yeah.
And one
Yeah.
of the things that you both discussed in that conversation was parenting. What is it like for a parent with young children looking down the barrel of this story?
I think it becomes harder to get to acceptance. Like when you watch my videos with Guy, I went through a whole, like, not only questioning the evidence, but wanting to come up with something to deal with it. Like, I think when I was speaking with Felice, she was sort of along the same lines. Like, she has kids, and she was thinking, how are we going to prepare for this, or what would be some possible solutions and that kind of thing. I think it's almost like you're compelled in that direction, or your dissonance is just really great for accepting and not accepting the evidence. It's really a tough position to be in, because I guess just your heart is towards your children, and your instincts, your biology is just towards their survival, right? So it makes it extraordinarily difficult to come to grips with the evidence. And yeah, I was kind of anticipating you would maybe ask that question here today, and it's because it's very real. Parents, grandparents, with people with a vested interest in other human lives is it makes it really hard to approach this topic. But it doesn't make it any less interesting, which has kept me coming back.
Yeah, I find it incredible. I don't have children myself, but I'm surrounded by them. All my friends and family members have them. And the grief that I have thinking about it would be minor compared to what a direct parent. So I think it's one of the greatest challenges that's coming up is A, managing our grief, and B, managing the grief of the youth. So that's why I wanted to have a look at this side of the whole subject.
Yeah. It's actually, I still go back and forth in my thinking about, just embracing the cold hard facts as they are, and going into magical thinking, or just kind of just pretending that none of this is happening. Like it's just sort of, you go into a bit of denial, or a lot of denial, I just go to work, and I just kind of assume like I never knew about any of this. And then it hits me again when I see something on Facebook, or I recall some conversation that I had. It just hits me like a ton of bricks, right?
Yeah,
So it's
I thought that was, so go on, sorry.
I was just going to
go
say
ahead.
it's back and forth. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when Felice said that you asked her, how does she bring the subject up with her colleagues? And interestingly, she said, I don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's quite interesting to see that a woman with her expertise and education is working in amongst people and not going down that road. I understand it totally, but it's a very, very weird feeling to be keeping that part of your thought process out of the conversation.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff, and I feel lucky that I have one colleague that I can talk with openly about this, and it's nice. She doesn't totally agree with the quick, like near term human extinction, but otherwise she gets where I'm coming from and where all the evidence is pointing at. But I mean, it's kind of vital psychologically, I think, to have an outlet, somewhere where you can process this stuff when it comes up, and to not feel like you're at risk of, I guess, losing your reputation or losing your credibility, like losing a lot of things, like like Guy, you expressed to me going through all of that, and you're kind of like the poster boy for that, right? I mean, having the courage and then experiencing the loss. So
Yeah. And, we need not agree on the timing of our demise to have a conversation about habitat for humans going away. And so that's what makes this so interesting for me, is the pushback that we all get when we have accepted our near-term deaths and our near-term demise of our species, and we're not pointing to a date. And that ambiguity is difficult. It's difficult for me. It must be difficult for you. It's difficult for everybody listening, because I think it would be a lot easier for most people to accept, even the people who are very reluctant to reach acceptance. I think it'd be a lot easier if we would just tell them it's, Tuesday, the 27th of whatever date, because then they know. And that ambiguity is just too much for people to handle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just it's coming, but you don't know. It's coming soon, but you don't know when. That is very challenging concept, and it keeps your anxiety kind of peaked unless you have some skills and strategies that you're actively using. And and what I've learned as a psychologist is that most of us growing up in this culture don't have mental health skills. In fact, we're just kind of more often led into illness, especially if we have sensitivities and predispositions. And so, I mean, if you don't have something within you or around you to manage this information, like, it can really be extremely uncomfortable, and it can keep your anxiety really high. And that's another one of the reasons I wanted to participate, was, to spread mental health information, but also in this area, because it seems it's such a sensitive area of thinking and feeling, right?
Right. And you noticed that in spades after our initial conversation when you posted it online, and you're a sensitive guy, and that didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
You want to walk us through that a little bit?
No, yeah. Well, when I had the first couple of interviews, my thought was, what am I getting into? And when stuff comes up about possibilities of, like, the higher level agents that have been, maybe trying to undermine some of your work, and your time in the university, and you just start wondering, like what are you stepping into, even though it's very interesting and you want to play a role and be helpful. But I mean, seeing the vitriol in the comments that people spew out is just it's discouraging, it's disappointing, and it's hurtful. People really do like to take those opportunities to be cruel. Um, my first exposure to that was, that hurt. That hurt even from a distance, not knowing these people, and so I wanted to just kind of back off and not be a part of it, and but then I changed my mind and put things back up and kept going, and my sense towards it sort of changed, and I found that overall there's more people who are supportive and interested and wanting to help one another. I mean, I looked at my stats for likes versus dislikes and the comments in general, and most people I think actually care about one another in this domain, and which is that. So then it kind of switched to being more encouraging and shifted my perspective on humans somewhat. It's nice to see that people want to be kind and caring as well. So I can see the balance, and I can actually see it's a greater balance in the more positive direction. And so I'm not afraid to be here anymore.
and I think another indication of that positiveness is the people who have contacted you and want to have continued conversations. It's not as if this subject is going away or the people who are interested in having a conversation are going away. There's a lot of people out there who have nobody to talk to. And you're a professional who knows how to listen and knows how to interact with people, and you're incredibly intelligent besides. So of course people are reaching out to you. And it's nice to feel needed until, at least in my case, until I read one of those comments on the troll farm, and then I feel like I'm not so needed anymore, and then you just want to go crawl into my bed for a few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how heavy one nasty comment can hit you if you're not putting it in perspective. Because we're humans with sensitivities after all, and no one likes to be rejected, hated, right? So,
right.
I don't care who you are; it doesn't really matter.
Because of the culture we grew up in, we all appreciate and seek validation. We want to be recognized for being positive human beings and for the actions that we're taking. And so when you just get hammered upside the head when you present this information, which is rooted in evidence, you're just like, what? Where did that come from? But that's the nature of humanity, I suppose. Now, you mentioned some psychological skills and strategies that allow people to come to grips with this information, and you're the expert on that topic. Can you walk us through some of those?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's standard mental health stuff that I talk about with people in my own work. When I was speaking with the folks online, many of them were, and I would ask them, what's working for them and what do they recommend? And quite often we would talk about present moment awareness, mindfulness, that kind of thing. So, you're not projecting into the future too much, which this topic, you can easily start doing that. You can easily get very catastrophic in your thinking. I mean, because that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about doomsday catastrophe. So, I mean, the important thing is it seems, and what's working for myself and others, is to bring yourself as much into this moment as you can and find gratitude for the things that are good in your life, and for everything that's still working in the ecosystem, for the health and well-being that does exist in nature and in the people that and in your relationships, and kind of just live it really one day at a time, or even 1 hour at a time, if you want to get a little bit more extreme about it. Having good conversations with people, I think, is often overlooked, but essential in our modern day and age. I think we've really many of us have lost the ability, or never acquired the ability, to have a good interaction, to listen, to respond to others in a way where they feel heard, and they're not alone, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that these interactions actually act as an example as well, like when people are seeing, what it looks like to hear someone express on this subject, and then have some feedback. What does good listening look like, and how can they bring that into their own lives and into their day-to-day life with the people who are open to being a support in this area. I don't see how it could not eventually be absolutely necessary as more and more of the Earth symptoms start coming up. I was looking at the fires in California just today, and it just seems so apocalyptic. Like, they're driving down the highway and the whole thing is bursting into flames, right? Like,
Yeah, I've seen several pictures and little video clips on social media, and I mean, California and the Bay Area in particular, it's just on fire. The oil containment facilities are right next to a massive fire. 200,000 people have been evacuated. This is the real deal.
Yeah, it just sort of, you can see how it just compounds, and it can become more frightening. And you hear people when they're recording these videos, they sound afraid, and their children sound afraid. And so, I mean, that's real stuff that you can't ignore. And yeah, you need to be able to process that in some way. And I guess that's what I'm trying to teach in a roundabout way, and as it be an example when we're having these conversations too. What are the feeling words that are relevant, and why does it make sense to feel that way? And trying to have empathy and compassion, all that kind of stuff.
Right, that's great. And you mentioned standard mental health stuff, but it's not standard to me, and probably to most of our listeners. So can you go a little deeper beyond the importance of living in the here and now, which I agree is critically important, and also the proper skills for interacting with others? So can you go a little further, maybe on both of those, or onto other topics that would allow people to more readily come to grips with the worst news you could possibly hear?
Well, I mean, what you want to be able to do is, I mean, I teach cognitive behavioral therapy primarily, and another relative modality of that, which is called dialectical behavior therapy. And both of those basically involve learning how to recognize irrational thoughts when you're having them. Like in Aaron Beck's cognitive therapy, there's 10 common irrational or distorted types of thinking that you can get stuck in, and you can end up kind of looping in your thoughts and your feelings as they, and you can go in between all these different distortions. And so when you're learning about mental health, you're learning to become self-aware, and you can start to see, when am I having this particular type of thought distortion, such as catastrophic thinking, is it as catastrophic as I think it's going to be in the next tomorrow or next week, or am I blowing it up bigger than it needs to be right now, kind of thing. So learning to recognize what those thoughts are, and learning how to bring in other information to challenge those thoughts, and then, like, at the same time, learning to recognize your emotions and settle those, because if you can't settle your emotional experience, then you can't think rationally. You can't allow other information to come into your thinking. You get really rigid and narrow and inflexible, and that can either lead to people getting really irritable, really difficult to get along with. It can lead to them isolating themselves, or doing and saying things that they regret. Basically just not functioning well in their life. And so when I'm teaching people in my practice, I'm trying to, we draw diagrams and we talk a lot about feelings and how to basically settle down the fight, flight, freeze response, and how to pinpoint the particular irrational thoughts that they get stuck on, and how to get out of those. Basically, it's like how to get out of those loops, those little vicious circles of thought and feeling, and then carry on, basically. And sometimes letting go of those irrational thoughts means settling in acceptance, which I think in this subject area you probably end up having to kind of end up doing. Like, you can't keep fighting reality. You have to kind of go, well, you know, this is what it is. It's the environment is broken. It is past a point, past tipping points. And, you know, if I keep fighting this, I'm going to be in a lot of distressful emotion that's going to keep me, you know, having more of those distorted, irrational thoughts, more of those impulsive, reckless behaviors possibly, and having more difficulty getting through the rest of my life. So I don't know if that helps answer sort of in a nutshell kind of what I do. I don't go into that depth when I'm speaking with people, but that's kind of my practice in a nutshell.
Right. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
even, I mean, that's the thumbnail sketch, obviously, and you have years of training behind you to deal with these topics. But so that's a wonderful starting point, and I'm sure there's a lot more. Do you give people advice, or do you give them advice only when they ask for it? Do you sort of ask questions that steer them to finding their own way, or how does it work when you get to the point that you recognize some of these challenges that they are having as an individual, and how do you proceed with them?
Like when someone needs to make a big change in their life, or they want to, or something like that, or big decisions,
Or,
that kind of thing, or
well, as they're still coming to grips, right? So especially
yeah.
early on, people, especially parents, as we've already discussed, must want to fight, right? They must want to do something. And we have this human history that shows us that we can do unbelievable things, truly astonishing works.
Mm-hmm.
And so accepting, for some people, sounds a lot like giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to give up when their children's lives are at stake. So, and yet, if you fight something, I mean, acceptance is a gift. So how do you help somebody find that balance in their own lives?
Sometimes I think that comes down to where a person is at for what they're wanting to, if they're wanting to find acceptance or not. Like, choosing to get to acceptance is a very, I think a person needs to be ready for that, and not you can't just kind of do it on a whim kind of thing. But like, so the question you're asking is how to advise somebody who is challenged with acceptance, or they want to. Is that where you're getting at?
Yeah, or you know, maybe they're struggling with acceptance even being a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially if they have young children and they want those children to live a long time, should they just accept their demise next Tuesday, or you know?
Well, when it kind of
say,
reminds me of when I would have conversations with you, actually, and because as we were talking, I was kind of inching towards acceptance, right? We would talk about some aspect of the subject area, and then, you know, you would do your thing, and you would bring forth the evidence and put it in a framework, connect the dots, and then as you would do that, I would go through big internal challenges, right? And
right.
so, I mean, if a person wants to inch towards acceptance, I think they need to face the information. They need to try and have some of the conversations. They need to be willing to feel some of the feelings that go with this learning. You know, and if you really want to get to acceptance, then really open yourself up to the depth of the information, and you know, honestly, openly look at what's going on in the world. And, you know, if you're feeling the sadness, if you're feeling the hopelessness, to try and actually go into those feelings, instead of fight, instead of trying to cover them up or ignore them, or turn to corrupted sources of information, that where you can just kind of you could shut down your anxiety and your fear if you wanted to. Like, I remember when part of my process with you, I would sometimes explore some of the information on the other side, and it would basically it would invalidate everything you were saying, and then I could feel my anxiety drop, right? I was like,
Sure.
wow. I was like, wow, that's a relief.
Yeah. I mean,
all
about everything.
all I got to do is listen to the other the people who are claiming that there's we don't have anything to worry about, and everything is sort of, the effects of all the gases are in the atmosphere are trivial or minimal, or
Right.
or they're we can't assume to know enough about the world to make these kinds of long-term projections. But if you want to avoid acceptance, like, turn to those other sources. That's what I would say.
Right.
If you want to get to acceptance, like, listen to the ones who are telling the truth. If you're having feelings, don't avoid those feelings. Try and openly express those, and find why those, and honor those, validate those, and continue pressing forward, basically. Because you can go, you can go backwards if you want to.
Sure, absolutely. And in fact, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in her 1969 book, pointed out that the so-called stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief, don't have somebody going stair-step like from one to another. There's lots of back and forth throughout your lives and throughout the grieving process. And so it's not as if you spend 20 minutes at step 1 and then 25 minutes at step 2 and so on, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot of back and forth, and because our brains are relatively capable of taking in a lot of information, we can believe many things at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So we can believe that an ice age is coming next month, and that we're all going to be dead next Tuesday. And I use next Tuesday because somebody on social media accused me of predicting human extinction next Tuesday every week. So that's the latest joke flung my way, is that we're all going away next Tuesday. So every Tuesday I get through, I'm just astonished.
Has to be Tuesday, not a Wednesday or a Thursday. Okay. Right. Yes. And well, I mean, it kind of brings me again back to our conversations. You were patient with me, and I really appreciate that. And because I mean, people are going to go through phases of wanting to explore both sides. They're wanting to deal with to talk about their skepticism, and to talk about potential solutions. I mean, from what I'm noticing, I think people go through these phases, and maybe more so if they have children, right? And to have someone who's expert in the field and is willing to listen and work through all those waves of denial and fear is that's hugely beneficial. So I mean, maybe people can look at that too, and like not only appreciate you for that, but look at that as an example of how to help somebody get to acceptance. Like, just recognize people are going to go through these stages, and they're going to want to fight for their lives and their children's lives, and right, it's pretty normal stuff for humans to do that.
Of course, and nobody can blame anybody for that, and that's what makes it so challenging, right? Because nobody's going to blame you for fighting, for resisting, for not wanting to believe this, and yet acceptance is a gift, and we don't have to agree that it's next Tuesday or even the Tuesday after that. But if we agree that at some point we're all going to die, as with every other organism that has ever lived, if we agree that our species will go extinct, as with every species that preceded us, and that it's not far off, and not far off leaves that ambiguity. But if we can accept that, then I think that's very useful for people. It allows them to live with urgency, as you indicated. It allows them to complete relationships, which has become a primary part of my work, along with Pauline. And it allows people proper skills for interacting with others. So I mean, all of these seem like good, healthy outcomes to me. But
yeah, like to get it to a frame of mind where you can live as much as you can, each, for every remaining day that you have. So yeah, I hope that as people are studying this subject, that they make mental health a priority in their life. Not just through listening to what people like me say, but like exploring other sources of support in their wherever they live, and learning, reading books, and just because if you want to get to acceptance and you otherwise want to be sane, you need to be learning about these things as well. Especially if you have sensitivities, like people like me. Like I told you, my history with borderline personality disorder, and basically that just means I'm an extra sensitive person with a really very powerful amygdala in the brain that gets easily set on fire. I'm very passionate, but it can also undermine everything in my life at the same time if I don't manage it right. So I got to I have to be very careful and cautious about my thoughts and my feelings and how I'm dealing with those. And if anyone else out there is faced with anything similar, yeah, mental health needs to become even a higher priority in your life.
I don't go around telling people that I have extra amygdala in my brain. For starters, because I don't even know what that means.
The amygdala, it's in the core, the deepest center of the brain in the limbic system, and it's one of the compromised areas in people with BPD. Yeah.
Oh, so does this mean the lizard brain, the going back into the reactive port? Okay.
Yeah. So it gets activated very easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's the only way to deal with that, I assume, is by recognizing that you're afflicted, or that's probably not even the right term, that you are experiencing this phenomenon and working your way through it, right? I mean, you can't have a frontal lobotomy for something in the back of the brain.
Well, there's more than one brain area. That's the prefrontal cortex, where the executive functioning takes place, tends to be kind of underactive. So you have the overactive amygdala, and then sort of the underactive prefrontal cortex, where you do all your executive functioning and your problem solving. So, I mean, if you aren't doing something to try and settle your brain where it needs to be, then you can end up not having not being able to make sense of the world in an effective way. I'll put it like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So you got to be on top of the whole thing, and doing practices to basically settle down your nervous system, settle down the fight, flight, freeze, because it just gets turned on way too much, and then you can't think and problem solve and behave in ways that work. It's basically what it means. Yeah.
For me, to a large degree, accepting the severity of the crisis was a liberating thing for me. I used to beat myself up about how I was going to fix everything. Now that I understand that everything isn't fixable, it's taken a lot of the pressure off me. So that's one way. It's got easier for me having this knowledge, not harder.
Yeah, like getting past that point of you're saying, Kevin, like getting past that point of trying to find solutions. I think that absolutely has value as well, because I mean the stuff that is happening in the Earth system is, I think it is actually so beyond what individuals or groups of individuals can do. Like there's so much, I think, like Guy, you once said, there's so much inertia built into the system, and it's almost like life is going to do what it's going to do whether we want it to or not. That's kind of, when you look at you think of the big numbers, and how many people are engaged in this destructive culture and how much ignorance there is. Someone put up a good meme on Facebook the other day. They said, if you think we can solve the climate emergency when we can't solve homelessness and poverty, and that really struck me. I was like,
I saw that as well.
Yeah, So, I mean, how could we actually, deal with something on this magnitude if we can't get to that? But yeah, I mean, whatever information that you can use to let go of problem solving seems to be uh, large scale problem solving, I guess. Like not
Right.
problem solving in your individual life, but letting go of trying to fix the climate problems. Yeah.
Right. And, that's easy enough to deal with, if not necessarily accept, as an individual, right? Because we're one of 7.7 billion. And what could I possibly do to deal with this insurmountable force that is overwhelming us, right? But what about as families, as small bands or groups or tribes or families or communities or much less society? How do you suggest to people that they act, or do you even go there? Do you focus entirely upon them as individuals and coming to grips with this information?
I haven't had a lot of conversations about this since my interviews with people online. The people in my midst kind of they kind of joke with me about my dark interest in this in this subject area, and I don't think most people are ready to embrace it, honestly. So maybe in different parts of the world, there you could have these small communities where people can have open conversations about these things, and they can support each other in coming to terms, finding acceptance, having the interactions that can where they can process all of this stuff. I think it comes down to like you're asking, what can we do as families, as small groups?
Well, what do you recommend that people do within their own circles, or do you even spend any time there?
Huh. Like, I don't really go into all the survivalist stuff. Like, I mean,
Right.
if I was really being wise about the future, maybe I'd be getting like a supply going, and getting some things ready where we could become mobile. But I mean, that's sort of a futile thing because it doesn't really change your destiny anyway. But I mean, I don't know if there's like I'm puzzled when you're asking me that question. I'm honestly puzzled. I'm kind of going like, what can we do other than wait until it's done? Like, what
Right.
else? What else
Well,
can we do? Like, we could, if there are no real solutions, then what can we do other than comfort each other when these fears come up, and otherwise try and carry on in your day-to-day life, because I mean, you can't change the outcome, really.
right. Well, that's what I was looking for, is um, the conversation. You encourage people to have the conversation with the people around them, to anticipate what is coming, and to recognize that there's nothing we can do as individuals and probably as societies to turn the course. But we can have the conversation
Mhm.
so that everybody in the house at least has an understanding of where I'm coming from and where you're coming from. And we
Yeah.
don't have to agree on a whole bunch of the things that we're talking about. That gets into an interesting conversation that I haven't had for a long time, and I don't think we've had on this show. And that's the notion of prepping or preparing. And for me, I think back to when I was a kid, and I know everybody loves a story that starts with when I was a kid. But when I was a kid growing up in a rural area, a small village in northern Idaho, it was about 2.5 hours drive to the nearest real grocery store. And we went once a month we made that trip to the real grocery store, and we stocked up, obviously, on groceries. And what that meant was we have another month that we have to get through. So there was a lot of storage going on. So we always had a couple or 3 weeks supply of pretty much everything we needed. And of course, in northern Idaho, everybody had several cords of wood chopped for their wood stove to get through the winter, and some people had multiple years stored up. And so maybe that's what we could do. Maybe that's what we should do, is be prepared for these minor disruptions that have already afflicted many people around the planet, that obviously is going to affect people in California in the not too distant future, if it hasn't already, and have enough material goods, food, the ability to provide clean water for yourself and for your household if there is a disruption of a week or two. Because I suspect most people in the day of just-in-time delivery are able to survive 3 or 4 days with the food they have in their house, because you can always go to the grocery store because it's always open and it's always full. But what if it's not? What if it's going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks between the delivery of goods to the grocery store someday? So, we don't store a lot of food in the house I live in, but we have enough, I think, most of the time to get us through a month. And we have a reasonably decent water filter, so that if the water stops coming through the tap, we could go out to a nearby stream or river and gather some water up and process it so that it would be potable at least. And maybe that's all ridiculous too, but there's a big difference between planning for your family to survive 20 or 30 or 50 years into the apocalypse as compared to persisting for a couple of weeks when there's a disruption in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those disruptions are probably going to become more commonplace as these things unfold more and more. And probably bottom line is people are going to try and cling to life. And, of course, they're going to want their children to survive as long as possible, as probably the reality of it. To put a few things on hand, to have a few weeks or a month of supplies seems like a wise thing to do for the short term. Anyway, eventually, probably the individuals and families need to face the full reality, which is this can't go on forever, and that'll be the hardest moment, or those will be the hardest moments, and maybe that's when humanity will it'll turn as ugly as it can be, which I guess history has proven, or there'll be small groups where people will be as kind as they can be, and hope that you're around those kinds of people, and maybe we will surprise ourselves in those moments.
Right. I anticipate all of the above, actually. And we see in the disasters as they play out today, minor as they will seem compared to what we're facing in the future, that the best of humanity comes forth and the worst of humanity comes forth as well. And who are you going to be? We get to decide, to the extent we have free will, whether we're going to be the best or the worst examples when things really begin crumbling in our own little neighborhood. Now, Kevin, you live in a somewhat unique situation. You are literally on an island. It's a relatively small island. So probably you have, well, I know you have enough beer to last for a few days, but what about other supplies? What we might call other survival goods.
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I'm having with myself regularly. One part of me thinks that I should get a container load of food shipped out here. And then the other part of me thinks about, well, who am I going to share it with and who am I not going to share it with? And it's so dystopian that I don't actually spend much time thinking about the post-collapse and that after collapse in that period of time, because I think it'll be so ugly beyond comprehension that I won't really want to be a part of it. So I've removed myself to a quiet little island, and I'm going to keep my head down and I'm not going to stick it any more over the parapet than I already have, because I watch McPherson getting the messenger getting shot every day. So yeah, it's a tough one for me. I haven't what I'm going to do on that score.
You haven't given up the kegerator, though?
I haven't given up the kegerator. Don't tell people I have a kegerator in my lounge and I have beer on tap.
I mean,
Hey, Peter, there's one thing I wanted to ask you. What role does music play as your antidote to despair?
I often turn to it as a sort of a creative, expressive thing, especially when I'm working through personal, intimate challenges. It helps me, I guess, be in a different frame of mind, enjoy a hobby, and express what's in my heart, that kind of thing. And so I'm thankful that is something I can turn to, and it's an alternative to needing to rely on the people around me, which I'm thankful that they're there, and I think it's important as well. But yeah, to have alternative ways to work through things, and come to terms with things. We're all faced with difficulties in day-to-day life and in relationships, and those things are sort of seem to be nonstop. And if you got some sort of vehicle or device that you can use to come into again acceptance, then that's good. Because yeah, I think we're frequently faced with accepting realities. Music kind of gets me there, accepting the some of the hardships or the painful things that have to happen. But I don't want them to, but they have to. I like dark music. I've always kind of used it that way. I'm not like one of these happy-go-lucky musicians. I like go into the I'm like Beethoven, but not nearly as talented.
I listen to a lot of 60s and 70s music, and it's so poignant that all the hippies were warning about this so long ago, and now that collapses, we're on the brink of it. People still can't fathom that it could happen so quickly. It's really quite a really strange psychological blindness that people seem to have. You can't warn about something happening so far off in the future, and if we don't do anything, and then we do nothing, and then everyone acts surprised when it falls apart.
Yeah. I was going to add just one more thing there to the conversation. Having these conversations, I guess my hypothesis would be is if you're having the conversations that are inching you towards acceptance, I mean, maybe that is something that could change the outcome in where you experience the end with the people around you. So you could find that space that you talk about, Guy, that Viktor Frankl, right?
Yes.
Talks about that space. So like, what can you be doing to be able to have find yourself in that space where you can choose a response? So like, if you are coming to terms with the evidence, if you are working through the emotions, if you're having the right kinds of interactions, would it be more likely that you would be able to find that space of free choice, I guess, or what's the word I'm looking for? The freedom there. Yeah.
Yes, the freedom to make the decision. The decision is to help somebody while you're helping yourself. And that commitment to service, which obviously is so prevalent among the people having this conversation, I'm afraid is not all that prevalent among the masses. But maybe we'll see more of that as the situation continues to unravel. I derive my greatest happiness, my greatest joy from helping other people. And it's interesting, my partner Pauline and I were walking home from somewhere. We just took a walk into the cemetery because some of my favorite people are there and nobody gives me a hard time. Those are my people at the cemetery, I got to tell you. And so we're walking back from our walk through the cemetery, and somebody shrieks up beside us in their pickup trucks and says, "We need to get a bottle of wine. Where do we get that?" And it seemed like it was an emergency. So I was ready to jump into the back of the truck and take them to the liquor store. And Pauline is just like, we can just give them directions. We don't have to hold their hand. And I'm like, I'm so committed to service. I just want to hold their hand and get them to the liquor store. And even if it wasn't a liquor store. So maybe we'll see more of that in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, and I hope that there's people that can be taking some of these steps. I mean, in larger and larger numbers. I mean, I think that the end days where people are really getting extremely aggressive, that's what freaks me out the most. And I hope that would not be the ultimate reality everywhere. But that's just my hope.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's all of our hopes.
Hey, Peter, we're going to have to bring this wonderful hour to a conclusion. Thank you very much for your time today and for our listeners as well. And thanks, Afrozen, for our theme music. You can catch NBL on PRN the first Tuesday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 8 a.m. Wednesdays here on Rakino Island. Our next episode is live on December the 3rd, 2019. If you missed the broadcast, you can find the show in the archives at prn.fm, the Podbeam, and at Stitcher. And feel free to rate us on iTunes. And you can continue to follow the Nature Bats Last blog, guymcpherson.com, for further updates, interviews, and speaking tours. And you can keep up with my work at kevinhester.live. Over to you, Guy.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you very much, Peter. We appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Great. And until next time, remember, the dominant culture has been very clever, but in the end, nature bats last.
Mother Nature, she's gonna get you. Yeah, she's gonna get you. Mother Nature, she's grown to hate you, and she's gonna get you. Gonna get you, you betcha.
Every year of my life, that's almost 52 years so far, the world has become a worse and worse place.